What is up, Janksters? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHawks42 on the internet, and today I want to talk about Thoughtseize. I had a great conversation this morning on stream with a couple members of my chat about Thoughtseize specifically, and I thought this would be a great opportunity to share my thoughts on the card before they get seized and really break down what it's doing to older formats and start a conversation. You know, this isn't me telling you whether or not the card is good or bad. I want to share my thoughts with it, explain the pros and cons of having the card in the format, and share some problems that I see with it. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. So yeah, after you get done listening to this video, please do that. I'd appreciate it. Anyway, so Thoughtseize is a sorcery for one that was reprinted in Amonkhet Remastered on Arena, and as a result, we are seeing it in Explorer and Historic. Now, as an Arena player, those are the formats that I can speak to authoritatively, so that's what I'm going to lean into, or at least more authoritatively than anything else. As I understand it, in Pioneer and Modern, this card is also just an absolute house. But it says, target player reveals their hand, you choose a non-land card from it, that player discards that card, you lose 2 life. So forcing your opponent to discard any non-land card of your choosing for 1 mana is phenomenal. If your opponent mulligans down to like 6 or 5, and then you Thoughtseize them, they feel awful, because they're just left with nothing. Not literally nothing, but very little, and they're left at the mercy of their top decks. Now, opponents can still top deck their way out of those situations, which is nice. But Thoughtseize is just a very, very powerful card. Like, at the end of the day, it does a phenomenal job. You can hit it early in the game to disrupt your opponent's plan, knock them off curve, and potentially remove pesky combo pieces. And then you can hit them late in the game and pull out counterspells or interaction that could throw off your plans. So needless to say, the card is absolutely fantastic. And one of the best pros that I've heard about it, or one of the best arguments I've heard in support of Thoughtseize being a staple in these older formats, is it keeps combo decks in check, which I think is a fair concern. We've all seen those decks that combo off on turn 3. I mean, Tybalt's Trickery comes to mind, whereas, you know, think about it, actually, Tybalt's Trickery is a great example. Now, it's been banned out of so many formats that it's just not an issue anymore, but it could allow a turn 2 play that could get an Ugin onto the battlefield, or an Ugin and a Coma if you had a Genesis Ultimatum, or whatever the case may be. Just huge monsters into the game as early as turn 2. That results in basically a non-game. It's just over. Meanwhile, if your opponent has 1 Tybalt's Trickery in hand, and you hit them with a Thoughtseize, you pull that Tybalt's Trickery out of their hand, they can't do their trick on turn 2, and they are stuck dead in the water, possibly with some of these really high-cost cards in their hand that they had no intention of casting. So that's pretty fantastic. The other one that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that is a combo deck that we do see in both Historic and Explorer specifically is Greasefang. Greasefang Okiba Boss. This is a very powerful combo deck that results in getting the Rat Pilot down onto the field quickly on turn 3 usually, sometimes as early as turn 2 with some very crazy shenanigans in Historic specifically, but usually involving Can't Stay Away, the reanimation spell. But in that situation, we then pull Parhelion out of our graveyard and attack our opponent for a ton, and it results in kind of a non-game if the combo can be executed, because it deals a ton of damage on turn 3, leaving the opponent basically dead on board if they don't have a Wrath. And even if they do have a Wrath, it's very possible for the Greasefang deck to rebuild pretty quickly. So it's a very powerful combo, very powerful deck. It is no longer... There was a minute there where it looked like kind of the bugaboo in Historic and Explorer that was just kind of taking over everything. I think primarily because it was an explosive gimmick that people really enjoyed playing with, but people have learned how to counter it and prevent it, and Thoughtseize is not the only way to stop Greasefang from going off, but it is a very consistent, very strong way to stop it from going off. So it's very, very helpful in getting those decks in check. However, it also leads to just a general feeling of frustration, because if you are on the draw and your opponent hits you with a Thoughtseize, there is literally nothing you can do about it. You're giving up perfect information on what your hand is, and you are losing one of the most valuable resources that you have in that hand. It hurts, man. It is and for 1 mana, the effect is very, very powerful. Meanwhile, we see other versions of this effect, like Check for Traps, for example, from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. That's very, very similar, except it costs 2. But in this case, where Thoughtseize just you lose 2 life if Thoughtseize resolves. You just shock yourself in the face for 2, which, to be fair, like it's not nothing. That does add up, especially in formats with shock lands and whatnot. You can very easily get yourself down to 16 or 14 life before your opponents even attacked you, which can, give them an advantage. So that's not nothing, but it's not much, and the value that you get off Thoughtseize is definitely worth it. But the interesting thing when you compare Check for Traps with Thoughtseize specifically is that with Check for Traps, you may not lose life. If you are removing an instant or a card with flash, they lose life. The opponent loses life, and you've monkeyed with their hand. And on top of that, Check for Traps goes into exile. It's not discarded, so your opponent can't take advantage of shenanigans in that way. They can't take advantage of their graveyard with whatever you discarded. So that's a thing. But yeah, so I feel like Thoughtseize is a very, very potent card. It is very, very powerful. And one of the things that I want to propose is that I think it might be time in Historic and Explorer to look at, and by extension Pioneer and Modern as well, to take a look at adding other powerful cards like Thoughtseize in other colors. And maybe this is me talking out of school, but with Strixhaven's Mystical Archive, a number of very, very powerful cards were reprinted and injected into Historic, some of which were immediately banned. Others were not. Cards like Brainstorm, for example, were not banned right away. They ended up getting banned eventually because they proved too problematic and too powerful. Fair enough. As was Time Warp. Turns out extra spells that you can repeat out of the graveyard, or extra turns that you can copy out of the graveyard, a bit problematic. Who would have thought? But in any event, so those cards got the ban hammer, but other cards like Swords to Plowshares, which is an instant speed for 1 in white, exile target creature's controller gains life equal to its power, and Lightning Bolt in red. Lightning Bolt deals 3 damage to any target instant for 1 red. I feel like both of these cards, Lightning Bolt and Swords to Plowshares, were immediately banned in Historic the moment Strixhaven dropped. They just said, like, Wizards was like right out of the gate, nope, these are not coming to the format. No way, no how. You're not going to see them. Sorry, everybody. Don't expect it. Which, to some degree, I think is understandable. They are very, very powerful cards, and I can appreciate Wizards making a firm stance on some of that stuff. And there were other cards that got printed in the Mystical Archives, like Channel, for example, that were never legal in any format, and I don't think anyone's clamoring for that. I think we all accepted, like, yeah, that card's cracked in half. It wouldn't really make sense to put that here. Why they reprinted the set at all, I don't know. That's a story for another day. But I actually believe at this point that Swords to Plowshares and Lightning Bolt are both in a comparable position to Thoughtseize. And if you don't agree with me on that, I do want to point out one case, which is, to be fair, Lightning Bolt can just end the game. If your opponent is at 3 life, you top a Lightning Bolt, you win. It's that simple. So yeah, like that's a mode on this card that that Thoughtseize doesn't have, and Swords to Plowshares definitely doesn't have. So sure, that's a thing. And maybe Lightning Bolt is just too efficient of a burn spell. Possibly. But I think it would be fair, at least in Historic, to try it out. And I want to point out Greasefang again. Let's go back to the target for these hate pieces, just for the sake of an example. Greasefang has 3 toughness. Greasefang dies to a Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt is a perfect response to the Greasefang combo deck. So if the goal is to keep combo decks like Greasefang in check, Lightning Bolt does it. Swords to Plowshares, also instant speed removal, capable of removing Greasefang before the ability triggers. And the opponent gains some life as kind of a balancing factor for that. So I mean, this is just one example, but I believe in formats where Thoughtseize is legal and Thoughtseize is deemed safe, I think it is fair that some of these other powerhouse cards that we have just dismissed out of hand just for being too powerful are worth considerations. Now, it's also notable that Thoughtseize was reprinted in Amonkhet, and as a result is legal in Pioneer, and as a result is now also legal in Explorer and Historic. However, both Swords to Plowshares, with the exception of the Mystical Archive printing, Swords to Plowshares is not Pioneer legal and therefore not legal in Explorer regardless, because the Strixhaven Mystical Archive did not impact Pioneer legality. Same is true with Lightning Bolt, which also saw a reprint in the Strixhaven Mystical Archive. But yeah, it is also not Pioneer legal. Not that it's been banned. It wasn't banned out of Pioneer. It's just never been printed in a Pioneer legal set. So as a result, it's been reprinted. Actually, Swords and Lightning Bolt are both interesting in that they have been reprinted a bunch because they're high demand cards in Legacy and Commander. And so as a result, they've been reprinted a ton in supplementary products. They've been reprinted in master sets. They've been reprinted in commander products. We saw them in the Strixhaven Mystical Archive, but they've very strategically never been or have not been in a standard set in an incredibly long time. And as a result, are just not legal in any of these formats, which I think is a shame because I think these cards are very powerful, absolutely, but I think they are on par with Thoughtseize. And so I would ask the question, not just do we make Swords to Plowshares and Lightning Bolt legal in Historic and Explorer, but does it make sense for us to look at powerful cards of similar power levels to the cards we already have and add them in? And I mean, also, just frankly, why should Black have all the fun? Like, why is Powerhouse 1 mana disruption limited to Black? Just curious. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you think I'm completely off my rocker in proposing that we open up the floodgates a little bit more and add some of these more Powerhouse old school cards back into these formats, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, if I may go off script for a second, not that I have a script to begin with. Who uses scripts? Actually, a lot of successful YouTubers use scripts. That's beside the point. Counterspell. For a very long time, Counterspell was deemed a card that was completely out of bounds in Modern. Modern would be just completely disrupted and completely thrown off if Counterspell existed in it. But then, when Modern Horizons 2 came out, Counterspell was printed into Modern. And from what I understand, it hasn't destroyed the format. I've heard a lot of people complaining about cards that are ruining the Modern format. I've never heard anyone mention Counterspell. So, just a thought. It's one of those things that for power level reasons, Counterspell was off the table in Modern for a very, very long time until it wasn't. So just a thought. And maybe it's just because I really want to be running, maybe just because I really want to kill somebody with a Lightning Bolt and Explorer. I really do. Not going to lie. I want 1,000-year storm a Lightning Bolt. That's what I want to do. Is that efficient? Is that smart? Absolutely not. Does it sound like a lot of fun? Oh, yeah. Yeah, so that's just my thought. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. It makes a huge difference. And I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Yeah, am I completely off my rocker for wanting these 1 mana powerhouses in my formats if Thoughtseize is around? Yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. In addition to making YouTube videos like this, I also stream over on Twitch, twitch.tv/hamhawks42. I'd love it if you check that out. Yeah, and I will see you guys in the next one.